and take questions throughout. Just interrupt if you have questions. And we'll talk about it before Katie then puts you into breakout session. Okay, here we are, Forum 5. We've got today and then 5 more. And Liz will be concluding her class with the refugees and joining us for the last 3 forums. To the question that I just had before we started from Zui, explain a little bit more clearly the 10 topics and how each chapter is presented. So that's what this page does. First, an overview. Each chapter will tell stories in 8 parts. And the text overall, which will be 10 topics, 10 chapters, will have a preface. The preface explains who we are, what Bending Bamboo is. It will have a table of contents, TOC, an introduction, and the introduction will explain IC5 and our methodology. At the end of the teacher text, there will be an index to the grammar points, the development points, the linguistic concepts, the people who are interviewed, the provinces, the towns, the schools that are mentioned. And then there will be questions at the end of the book. So the teacher text for grades 10, 11, 12 should be about 220 pages. Okay, and then this is our proposal right now, and it can still be changed. So tell us if you see reason to change it. This is how 20 pages could be presented in each of the 10 chapters. The first 2 pages on the left will be a full-page photograph that profiles somebody or a group of people from the Delta. And then the facing page, so page 2, is a 1-page story, a profile of them. And what we're looking for, and this is what I'll talk about in this PowerPoint, we're looking for everyday citizens and students and teachers and people in the Delta who are stakeholders of the change that is facing the Delta. A local example, not a hero, not a famous person, but an everyday Delta local stakeholder. Okay, so that begins the chapter. It's a story, and stories engage. Stories bring people into the context. So we've said a lot about the communicative approach being context, content, tasks, and norms. But how do you draw people into the context? You can't just have a heading that says context. Now we're doing context. Rather, a story draws people into the context. Pages 3 and 4 then explain how Bending Bamboo scaffolds linguistic development learning objectives. So on the left page, page 3, it's what Bending Bamboo is doing in that chapter. And on page 4, facing it, are 2 columns of Tingan learning objectives, that's TALO, Tingan learning objectives, and the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So to your point, Zui, right there at the beginning of the chapter, after people are engaged with the story, we assure them that all the grammar and vocabulary points of Tingan, all the learning objectives of the SDGs are going to be addressed by Bending Bamboo in this topic, in this chapter. Okay, then 4 pages, pages 5, 6, 7, 8, are receptive skills. That's reading and listening. And it will be based on Krashen, I+1. So that comes out of his comprehensive theory, I+1. I+1 also here is introducing some development challenges and some concepts. So we gave the example in the workshop from 100 RC of some concepts from development from Ganta. So those are receptive skills, and they are introducing vocabulary, and grammar, not by breaking out a separate section, now learn vocabulary, now learn grammar. Rather, receptive skills of reading, listening, and development integrate the grammar and the vocabulary in the Gunta context and content. I+1. The next 4 pages, 9, 10, 11, 12, are productive skills, again based on Gunta context and content, but here the productive skills are speaking and writing and doing development. So we call that I+1+1. So in the middle of the chapter, pages 5 to 12 are pretty solid reading, listening, speaking, writing. Then at page 13 and 14, we introduce tasks. This is part of the communicative approach. Tasks that the students will do to apply their linguistic development education. And I'm suggesting that they have an ongoing chapter by chapter assignment where they keep a log, they keep a record of how they are applying their language and development skills on campus, in class, at home, in the community. Pages 15 and 16 are the norms. That's the behavioral shift. And we measure that qualitatively and quantitatively with monitoring and evaluation, with the MPI, which compares what the students are learning to a poverty index, to the HDI, which is a human development index, to KPI, which are key performance indicators. And I'm suggesting that week by week, chapter by chapter, the students also self-journal. That's a qualitative measurement of norms. Then, very, very importantly, pages 17 to 20, 2 things, summative and formative progress. So at pages 17 and 18, the summative progress reviews the grammar points, the new vocabulary, and the development ideas that are presented in this chapter. And it will cover everything that Tingan has and more. Pages 19 to 20 is formative. So summative shows, pages 17 and 18, summative shows, here's the checklist, here's what we've learned. Formative, pages 19 and 20, that's where we are going. So it's the end of the chapter, and we can call that closure, but closure here is actually a beginning. It's going forward, and it's classes and schools going forward with ideas and a photograph and a profile of themselves, their own story. So I'm suggesting that every chapter begin and end with a story. At the beginning of the chapter, it's a story of an everyday Delta stakeholder, somebody local, doing something right with development. And at the end of the chapter, what classes of students and schools have learned, and it's a place for us to capture their story and put that in the Bending Bamboo chapters as well. And I'm going to jump out of screen share and just ask if there are any questions. Zui, does that answer your questions about where the different linguistic skills, grammar, vocabulary, reading, writing, listening, speaking are addressed?
But I'm afraid that when we use some article from internet, or maybe we don't have the grammar point.
We write the grammar points, and we can modify that article to suit our purposes. We don't have to quote the article. We can say that we have drawn this material from this source on the internet, and we have modified it for our language classroom.
Yes, got it. Thanks.
Liz is expert at doing that. She's been doing that for 20 years. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Let me go back to screen share and move forward on this PowerPoint. Okay, so what will it look like? Across the top here, every part of the chapter is going to remind people that we're doing linguistics, Bending Bamboo, we're doing development, UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we're telling stories. So I give you again this picture of a famous storyteller, Studs Terkel, and I shared with you about him last week, his book called Working People. And, you know, he's known worldwide as a great storyteller. So stories capture the student's attention because it's human interest. We need to capture the human interest in stories. And we need to align our 10 topics for the chapters. And we're suggesting, we talked about this last week, aligning it with a symbol that comes out of Vietnam. So Bruce would then design a banner that would look something like the UN Sustainable Development Goal banner. Maybe it would be circular, not rectangular, but it would be what Bending Bamboo is covering. And so we need your help to connect A to B. Of the things in column A, what symbol from Vietnam best fits identity? What symbol from Vietnam best fits entertainment or health or care or education? So A to B, we haven't made any decision as to what symbol relates to which topic in Bending Bamboo. We need your help on that. So give Katie feedback on that, please. And we need more symbols to choose from. So keep thinking about that. Now, how do you narrate? People were asking, and Katie asked me to address in the PowerPoint before you go into your breakout. How do you do a profile? Okay, it has to be well written. It has to be engaging. It has to capture human interest. So it cannot be a boring one-page narrative of somebody that would not capture a high school student's attention. So here are some thoughts that I have. And then I'm going to give you some examples. So I just want to get through this slide, and then I want to move into asking you questions on how you would narrate somebody's story. And I've got a person in mind. So, you know, the narration will identify, and as a group, we need to identify people in the Delta who are innovative, creative, imaginative, curious. They are people who combine knowledge and skills to sustain the Delta. They are people who combine science and art. And here the art is language study, literature, art, culture. And the sciences are technology and engineering and math. Worldwide, that's called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And what we want to put into the STEM is the A. So we generate STEAM. And we'll use everyday Delta stakeholders to generate STEAM to propel a Delta of change. So there's some good imagery that we can play with there. Then the Bending Bamboo task examines a Delta community well to discern who are the stakeholders that are setting the norms, that are sustaining the Delta, that are combining science and art and knowledge and skills. So we want to build on evidence, and evidence is both positive and negative. So I put positive and negative there. People learn from failure. People learn from negatives. But hopefully they go from the negative to the positive. So we'll rely on that data and analysis. In our interviews, we will listen, we will observe. We'll need to take good pictures because to tell the story, to give the profile, we need that page at the beginning of the chapter of a really good photograph. And the point here is for the teachers, for us, Katie, Liz, Dan, Bruce, to capture these stories. And the bookends of each chapter, the bookends, the beginning and the end. We will open with a stakeholder profile, and we will close with a story of a class or school. Now, the broader we share this, the more people will pay attention to Bending Bamboo. If we're including stakeholder profiles, people will be interested because it might be their community, it might be their neighbor, it might be them, it might be their institute. And we need your ideas on who needs to be interviewed, who needs to be photographed. And then if we close each chapter with the story of a class or a school using a global classroom, or the English class working with a biology class to do something cool on climate change, this is excellent branding of what Bending Bamboo can do. So here's some examples from material that Liz has when we wrote IC3. We wrote IC3 several years ago with Nanyang University. And these are pictures of Vietnamese culture. So Liz had a section on water puppets. She had a section on Vietnamese weddings. She had a section on blue jeans and ao dais. So there's our daughter Annie when I think she was maybe 3, wearing one of her new ao dais. And Liz also introduced some of the Montagnard, the ethnic minority artwork from the mountains here. This is from the Hmong community. So these are pictures of Vietnamese culture. We have lots and lots of second language acquisition material from IC3 on all of these topics. But for Bending Bamboo, if we begin and end with stories, how do we capture and tell an engaging story of maybe the person who creates water puppets and sells them and does this not only to make a living, but to tell people about Vietnamese culture? Or if we share something about weddings and introduce all the vocabulary and meaning behind a Vietnamese wedding, how can we do that through the story of people, a couple? Or maybe it would be through the eyes, through the thoughts of a grandmother, the woman here on the left, the mother of the bride who is attending her daughter's wedding, okay? Or if we introduce ao dais and blue jeans, let's interview the seamstress and how she learned to make ao dais and how much money she earns sewing ao dais. And are ao dais as popular today as they were 5 years ago? Or how have the styles changed and why do styles change? So what we need to do is capture and tell engaging stories. So here's our friend Mui Gun. And we've heard so much about him. One of Katie's best friends. Mao, you took a busload of people from your high school. Your principal, other teachers were there at his cacao farm. And Tu, you were there not long ago. I don't know if you went with a class of Access students or some other group from your language center. But let me have you focus here on Mui Gun and tell me, how would you interview him? How would you capture his story? I'm going to jump out of screen share so I can look at you. What would you do to capture his story? You don't want to open a chapter with just, this is Mui Gun, he is 65 years old, he grows cacao, he makes this amount of money, he's part of ecotourism, and he's getting tired of it. Okay? What would you do to engage, pull students, high school students, teachers, other departments on a high school campus or at a university? How would you pull them into a story about this amazing person?
If you have an answer, you can raise your virtual hand or physical hand and unmute and speak.
And I do presume this is part of what will go on during the breakout session, because you're beginning to develop tasks. And one task can be learning how to narrate, learning how to hear and capture a story and do something good with that story.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a really good question right now, you can definitely voice it in your breakout group. And it doesn't have to be about Mui Kung in your breakout group.
No.
Another person.
So, Katie, I'm going to go back and here are questions I thought of. I woke up early this morning thinking, what questions would I want to ask Mui Gun? So the obvious stuff. And Mao, if you're there, these are the questions your students were asking when you took the busload of students there. How do you make chocolate and why? And when did you start? Who taught you? And how did you learn? And he had answers to all of those questions because he's been asked those questions 100 times. But if you observe Mui Gun, you see that he's an engineer, he's an ecotourism entrepreneur, he is a food scientist, a husband and father, a farmer, a storyteller, a passionate person. So you might ask him, which of these comes first? And ask him, what have been your greatest failures? Where did you really go the wrong way? And learn from it. And what have been your greatest successes? And he's got pictures on his iPhone that have ambassadors from Belgium and Sweden there on the farm. But, you know, he's probably also had some guests, some ecotourists come to the farm who were less agreeable. And the question to him might be, how do you learn from all of these different kinds of people? And Muigung, when you retire, because you will retire, who is going to carry on this enterprise? Who are you mentoring? Is it your children? Are your children farmers too? Will they live in Mikan, or have they already moved away with all the money you've earned from cacao? Have they moved to Ho Chi Minh City? What is the impact of climate change on your orchard? And how do you manage pests and pollution and plastic? And what do you wish, and this is a very important question that we could ask of every person we interview, what do you wish every teenager growing up in the Delta to know? And has your capacity and competence to use English changed your life, your livelihood? So that was my brainstorming this morning on my keyboard. And if I were to sit down with you, and if we were to have sessions at the next workshop around people that are going to be featured because of the topics and the needs of the Delta in our Bending Bamboo text, we could brainstorm on questions and how to really interview and create great, great, engaging narratives and stories of people. So what are your thoughts in response to this brainstorm? Katie, let me put you on the spot. You know Muigung as well as anybody here.
Yeah, I think asking the right questions and listening is an art form that we can all become better at. And when I visit your students and they ask me, where are you from? How old are you? And then they don't let me answer. I would love to talk to them, and I would love to tell them stories about where I'm from, and I would love to hear about stories where they're from. So by introducing such a profile at the beginning, we're teaching our students how to engage in good listening and good storytelling, which I think is a skill that is lost in the traditional textbooks.
So art and science. We've made a lot of this point in the class with Dr. Hiep, that we're doing SLA, second language acquisition, not the science of studying language. Okay, so we're doing both art and science. And to Katie's point, what she just described, that is the integrated language set right there. It is listening, speaking, taking notes, writing, reading background, and then trying to put it into a really compelling story, writing again, saying it out loud, practicing it, seeing whether it makes sense, seeing whether it engages. That's all the integrated aspects of the communicative approach. And the students are learning about development. Here is Muigung, who developed something really cool. I think he is the best example in Mikan of ecotourism. But do people understand all the work that went into creating that model of ecotourism? I've done a lot of international development in many countries, a lot of it with farmers. And you know what often happens is a husband and wife will work so very hard for decades to build a great farm and to earn money so that they can more highly educate their children. And what do the children do? They leave the farm. They go to the city. And the parents' effort to create the farm is left to whom? So to sustain Ganta and the Delta, you will have people who will leave Ganta, who will go to the city, but you will have other people who, for all the right reasons, stay in Ganta and keep developing really great examples of development like Muegun. So let me, if there are some comments, we'll take those, otherwise I'll proceed. Go ahead, Ian.
I think to engage a student at the beginning of the lesson, we need put some challenging question like how difficult for Mr. Merkung communicate in English, and how difficult for him to grow cocoa and make chocolate in Canada. And I think this information can encourage students, although they are in Canada, but they don't know about Mr. Merkung, and they will get involved in the lesson better later.
So you're saying we should include the questions in the narrative?
Or can the narrative just present the questions?
And we say that it's very challenging for Mr. Merkung communicate in English, although he's a farmer, and how difficult for him to grow cocoa and make chocolate.
So very good points. What is more engaging at the beginning of a chapter? The story or a list of questions?
Before we put the story about him, we put some questions.
Okay.
You could put the key questions at the top and then go into the narrative.
Right.
Or maybe it could be a side panel.
Mm-hmm.
Tu, what are your thoughts? You're muted.
Can't hear you. I think it might be your headphones. You're unmuted, but your headphone speaker might not be working.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think most of the chapters we can have some kind of like text, but for the Merkung visit, I did it another way. I brought to the classroom all of the products he had without any trademark on it. So my students try it, see the cacao fruit, see the different colors, see each of the products, taste it. Some of them really like hate it. Some of them probably like, oh, it's so bitter, and what makes that kind of product like bitter that way. Some try with the butter. Like all of the trial just give them the experience. This is something very normal. But then surprisingly, they didn't know that it's like from Cần. Okay, so I brought them to the garden, and this is where they know all of the story. But one expectation is a little bit like shock most of the visitors is like he just gives some very fixed expression of things. He cannot answer the question like the business or other thing. And I know that he just like got a stroke just like 1 month ago. That's why the time he spends with most of the visitors is very limited. And I let the student try a few things, you know, like by themselves, like trying the grinder and the roaster and all that thing to see like how hard it is. But one group I especially assign them to look at all of the relatives. We capture the relative behavior, and interestingly, we recognize that the only person really like young and involved in most of the work is his son-in-law. The daughter was a little bit like angry all the time, very irritated, but all of the visitors coming and asking the question. just the, you know, the mother very busy, and his wife is very busy at things. So one group really observe the behavior of the people who really like expected to take over the business and give the remark on the sustainability. So I think the best thing for the teenagers, like how can they really like value the labor instead of just the product, like the chocolate.
Beautiful.
Labor is very important because they are born with the really high basic thing. You know, like the heat over there, they cannot stand. They cannot like roll that in 5 minutes, even though like the roaster is just like empty. They don't want to touch the roaster because it's like they have the dark, you know, like dust outside. They go very quickly and clean the hands. So on that day, the most interesting experience is like how you make your hands dirty in a way you can make something happen. So I think it's not about chocolate, it's all about labor and how can they make the sustainability what like put their hands into the mud. That is what I feel when I take the two group of students, like older than like 19 years old, going there with the expectation for job, with a lot of questions, with a really like, you know, like things want to know, want to share. But when they get the reflection, you will feel like it is surprising because the reflection show that they really value just like 2 hours with him rather than any lesson you can have that. So I believe if you have at the same time the real objects, something like the product of something you want to introduce, they can taste it, they can touch it, they can see it. And at the same time, if you can have the video of the people who really involved in making, like joining the procedure instead of just like the tourists visiting the place, maybe they can feel, they have like more sensual like feeling about things. Like if we do really have like small young people doing the whole thing with him, or even like do it by themselves, I think it can work better than 1,000 words you can describe in the text.
Excellent.
That is what I feel.
To what you just described as Krashen's natural order.
Sorry.
That is precisely what Krashen means, what Chomsky and Krashen mean when they are describing the natural order. By introducing real objects and talking about them. As a mother, when you're teaching men something new, you're not first telling men the manufacturer of a product. You're trying to introduce a new taste to your son, and you're trying to get him to tell you whether he likes it or not. That's the natural order. The second thing that you did by having them get their hands dirty, by taking them to the place, they were applying their knowledge and skills. And that's a completely different kind of learning than just using a textbook. Our learning does not stop with the textbook and what happens inside of a classroom. So you took the applied knowledge and skills to the field. There, in observing all the other people, you saw how many mouths he feeds. So Mui Gung is supporting his family, his daughter's family, probably other families. He's probably supporting in a very important way Mikan, the surrounding community. He's the best draw to Mikan village that they have. So he supports many mouths. So that then raises a question, you know, of any farmer. How many mouths, how many people does a farmer feed? Or a fishing family feed? Or you know, any vendor in the market? How many people are supported by that kind of development, and how is it sustained? So we often talk about sustainable development as you know, how can it be done in a way to save the planet? Sustainable development, it means reducing our use of plastics. It means reducing pollution, waste. It means, you know, reducing the amount of chemicals and pesticides and all these things that are put into the atmosphere. But sustainable development also means that each member of the family gets to eat 2 or 3 meals that day, that surrounding neighbors also benefit from the development. And this is really good, what you're describing to, and Ian, your basic questions that are the scaffolding that a language learner needs, that's important. So we have to figure out how to lay it out so that we engage the students and we don't put them to sleep by making them first learn vocabulary, first learn grammar, and now we'll tell you a story. How can we do story listening? This goes back to what Liz presented at the workshop on story listening. How can we use story listening, chapter by chapter, topic by topic, person by person, to fully engage people? There are lots of chats. Katie, you're reading the chats, right? Are we good, or is there something I need to answer?
We're good. I think we should move on as well.
Let me get this done as soon as possible, but these were good comments and questions. So, you know, I throw up another person here who we're not going to write about, but I put Albert Einstein there. Everybody knows that face, but do people know that he was a violinist? We all know that he's famous for a theory of relativity, even if we can't explain what that is or how it affects my life. But how many people realize how many times Einstein failed before he succeeded, and how much time he spent walking and sitting and listening to music, and how much time he played his violin? He was an artist as much as he was a scientist. And who encouraged him? And who didn't? Who stood in his way? Who told him when he was a kid that he wasn't smart? In fact, Einstein was told when he was a teenager that he wasn't smart. So I put him up there because he's a great example for us on how to combine the art and the science and to encourage our students with important stories. And then my idea at the end of a chapter, if we begin the chapter with a narrative of somebody who is a stakeholder, let's end the chapter with pictures of our students and schools, our principals, teachers, students, parents, communities, capturing their own stories, seeing themselves as stakeholders, acquiring bilingualism with purpose. That, and not just test scores, but the test scores will be fine. That's the goal. And two, I'm going to keep coming back to the parable of the fish. The students seeing themselves as stakeholders and acquiring bilingualism with purpose, I think that is the water. And how does an English classroom learn from and contribute to everything else that's happening on the campus, whether it's a high school or a junior high school or a university or a language center? How does the language classroom contribute to the campus, and how does it learn from other parts of the campus? So too with the global classrooms. Let's have pictures and tell stories at the end of the chapters of the failure and success and the fun in global classrooms. And then a couple last points here, and then it's in your hands. Here's a portion of what Naomi put together of a story map, and it identified all the schools that were participating at one of our earlier workshops. And you can click on any one of those nodes and you will see the teacher and the students behind that node. What if we were to story map everybody joining Bending Bamboo and we captured and put into the story map their story? So you click on any of these schools and you get a story of what the students and teachers are doing. Another thing that could be really, really valuable is each of those global classrooms could be a node, a biomeridian node that captures data on climate change. I won't go into what biomeridian means, but we know what climate change is. And there's really simple metrics that could be handled on a high school campus to capture basic metrics of climate change. Vietnam is among the 5 most vulnerable countries on Earth to the effect of climate change. So our students' bilingualism with purpose could include STEAM-generated data, analysis, and action, and stories to a listening world. People would observe and pay attention. Schools would model what it means to be a stakeholder of positive, sustainable, resilient change. So what the hell is water? The human stories surrounding us. Bilingualism with purpose. Your students, your campuses. All right. That's what I've got. And I look forward to people's commentary and what you're going to be presenting now in conversation with each other in your breakout sessions. Katie, anything else that you want to highlight before they go into that? I know you gave them a lot of advanced material.
Yeah, so let me just share the breakout room assignment really quick. Here it is. So you should have, do you see, where am I? There. So today, every breakout group, there's going to be 4, is going to work on a narrative. So this is, everybody gets to be a storyteller today. And the topic is culture. I want you to think about one aspect that is most unique to Vietnam, or maybe just an overarching theme. And then can you identify a person that shows how this cultural aspect or theme has been retained over time? So we can think about things of Vietnamese culture in the past, but if you think about modern day Vietnam, how would you connect the past of Vietnam to modern day Vietnam? And who shows that? And what is that theme? What is that aspect that connects Vietnam of the past and today? And then my narrative group last week worked on this, but you'll go through identifying that person or that group of people. And then I want you to create really deep digging questions, okay? Not just what's your name, what's your age, but those questions that Dan presented in his earlier slides. And this one doesn't have to be Mui Kung, it can be anybody, right? So think about these kinds of things and then which person embodies those. And then what background research do you need? We always need context in our stories. And a story is more valuable if you know what's happening in the world around that person. And then finally, after you write your narrative, think about a piece, an artifact, whether it be a story, a video, article, book, or picture. And how can that, give me an artifact that connects to your story so that we can put that in the later sections of the unit, okay? So everybody this week is working on that beginning section of the culture unit. So y'all get to have fun writing a story today. We'll probably only have about 30 minutes in the breakout group. Again, my Gunta 7, if you could record your breakout room, that would be great. And oh, we didn't choose a guiding task. We're not going to choose a guiding task before this session because we don't have enough time. So we'll either come back and choose the guiding task, or I'll send you an email with a Google survey to choose one, okay? Do you have any questions before we go in? Alrighty. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
All right. I think we have everybody back.
Yes.
Okay. So we only have a few minutes left. I want each reporter to tell me who you chose to do your narrative about and why this person. Very easy. So can my reporters raise their hands? Always Anne.
And yes.
Who else? We have Anne, and who are the other reporters?
My group A to B.
V, okay. And then who else? There should be 2 more.
Lam.
Lam, okay. And then 1 more. Who's my final reporter? So I have Lam and V and Anvi.
And we.
Anvi. Okay, perfect.
Oh, we.
So let's start with Anne, our master reporter. Anne, who did
King reporter.
Thank you. Well, actually, we got a lot of interesting choices for this narrative. But we decided to talk about Mr. Cao Văn Lầu, who is the founder of Cải Lương, the very traditional music of Vietnam, because Miss Ian was really enthusiastic talking about him. So we finally decided to talk about Mr. Cao Văn Lầu.
Great. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's go to Miss V.
Yeah, we decided to talk about Mr. Võ Tòng Xuân. Yeah, because we think he contributes so much to the Bendy Bamboo. So we want to widen the Bendy Bamboo with the students, and we came up with a lot of ideas and the questions. So I will send the document for you later.
Perfect. How does he relate to culture? How does his story relate to culture?
Yeah, because we think that we should find out about his education background and the people influencing and inspiring him to make Cần Thơ better in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also what he experienced in his life also contribute to what he is doing for Cần Thơ at present. Yeah. So we decided to talk about Mr. Võ Tòng Xuân.
Perfect. Okay. I'm interested to see your questions. And then Miss Lam. Lam. Who did you choose and why? You'll have to unmute and speak. Perfect. Hey.
Yes, our group choose to talk about Mr. Lê Đình Bích. He's a professor of Cần Thơ University, and he's very famous for his good characteristic, like generous, and he has a lot of special talent, and he can speak English, and it's easy to invite him to come to the classroom to talk about like how can I say, a lot of information about him you can find on YouTube or
TV.
Is a documentary film about him. Later, Mr. will send you.
Okay. I like that you chose somebody that has documentation out there so we can tie it in. Yeah. That's a good point. And in your questions, I'm sure all of the people you chose can relate to Vietnamese culture in some way. I just want those questions you present in your document you sent to me, have questions that really dig into that aspect of culture, okay? Because every person can relate to culture in some way and they have a unique story about that. We just have to ask the right questions. So good. And finally, Anvi. Oh, you're muted.
Our group talked about Mr. Vũ Mười. Vũ Bình. He's the winner of the Southern Folky Festival contest last year, and he won with his new recipe of bánh xèo. He created bánh xèo duck pancake.
Duck?
Duck.
Oh.
Yeah. And so we will introduce about his motivation to interview about his motivation to create a new type of pencil and how it is better than the original one. The pencil is also an aspect of food and the culture of the Vietnamese people in general and the southern people in specific.
Great. Is his this is just a personal question. Is his banseo like southern style or central style? Is it the
southern style? Yeah.
I'm excited to read that one. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you, my friends. Reporters, please, please, please send me your documents with all of your group members' names. Remember your group members' names right now and write them down. We have trouble with that. And thank you for all of your hard work. Yeah, we'll see you next week. Dan, do you have anything to add?
What's our topic for next week?
I have to look at our list. We have one more. Let me see.
And we do it so that it feeds into the planning that has to occur for Tu and Mao and Zui for the global classrooms. Mm-hmm. Let's accomplish 2 tasks at once.
Yeah.
You can forward that to all of us later if you don't know right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure right now. I'll have to look through and see what's left in our templates. But
the only comment I have listening to people's suggestions, let's find narrative of women, not just men.
Good point.
In America, we fall into the trap of old white men being featured, and you're falling into the trap of old Vietnamese men. So be careful.
So you can have a couple.
A couple. Ooh.
Couples are good. Couples are good.
Power couple.
One bánh xèo gấc and one bánh xèo with 10 sim. So you can have both.
Yin and yang. Remember my balance quote in the narrative? Okay. Wonderful. Also, Ganta 7, please send me the recordings of your breakout room.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Have a lovely night and weekend.
Have a nice day.